Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and this program is about the evolution of consciousness. And what does that mean, consciousness and evolution? Well, it all goes back to the ancient science of alchemy. That's really where consciousness became solidified in the Western thought, where people started to investigate the nature of matter and how did the mind intersect with matter, and how can we shift the nature of reality. So that's why I have today with me someone who's really an expert in the field of alchemy, geometry, transformation technology, Aurelius Electrum.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me on the show.
Aurelius Electrum.
Yes.
Where does that come from?
Well, it's a little bit of a story, but one time I was working on I teach a practical alchemy. And we do actual laboratory alchemy where we're making plant medicines and these kind of things. So I was working on distillation, and I fell asleep and had a dream that my body was inside the flask.
Wow.
And so it was part of the dissolution process, and my skin was dissolving and falling off, and I could see my bones in the flask. And then this angel appeared and said, I am Archangel Oriel, and I rule over alchemy, and you are to take my name. And so that kind of all came about like that.
That is a great story.
Yeah,
well, let's talk about alchemy.
Yeah.
We can go to that first image.
Sure. Speaking of dissolution, so this is an old woodcut. And it symbolizes a king. So this is a similar idea where the dissolution phase in alchemy is sort of getting in touch with your emotions and sorting through problems that are keeping you back.
Right, but before we go to the dissolution phase, let's talk about what alchemy is.
Yeah,
it's the transmutation of...
Yeah, my favorite definition of alchemy is the art of transmutation through fire. Okay. And we have different stages, so you've heard about the basic four elements: earth, air, water, and fire. The first stage is really a fire stage, the calcination
stage. We have a slide of that, earth, air, fire, and water. I think it's the one after that one we just saw.
Yeah.
The one after that, I think, right? Is that? No, one more. That one.
Yeah, there we go. So there's a woodcut. Those symbols down at the bottom, one starting from the left, represent earth and water. They point downwards, and then air and fire upwards. So.
Oh, because that makes sense. Earth and water, they go downward.
Yes.
And air and fire flow upwards.
Right.
Oh,
and so the ancients sort of believed that everything was made up of a combination of these elements.
Right. Everything in the world was a combination of these elements.
And it was more a metaphor. You know, you hear modern scientists say, "Oh, they were crazy because they thought that everything was made out of these things," but they weren't. It wasn't really literal. They just had an understanding. Things that were more malleable had more water in them. Things that were harder.
But it's true, though. I mean, there's truth to it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So alchemy then is to take those elements and do what?
Yeah, so transforming from one thing to another. So if you had something that had more water and more earth into it, you could transform it to more airy and more fire.
Right, but the main thing was to take gold,
right,
or take lead or others and make it into gold.
Right, and that whole concept was in a physical sense, basically. The alchemists, what they were really trying to do was comprehend nature, and work with nature in order to manipulate nature and to make a more exalted form of your matter that you were working with. So,
and why did they want to do that?
Because it was emulating nature. Nature is always doing that. Everything in nature is continuously evolving
and changing.
Right. So they strove to manipulate things inside of the laboratory. But as well, it was an internal process. So the idea of changing yourself internally from lead into gold, you're dividing yourself up and analyzing your personalities and that, and getting rid of the parts you don't want, which we call the dross in alchemy. Getting rid of the dross.
Getting rid of the the substance not pure, the
yeah,
impurities.
exactly, impurities, and you do that through your interaction with other people, and you drive.
Get rid of your own impurity,
right,
emotionally.
emotionally.
Ah,
So, and
okay.
then mentally, and the purification of your thoughts, and so the idea was turning yourself from lead into gold, getting rid of the denser, more impractical.
Well, that's
parts.
part of it, but you were also an laboratory alchemist
Right.
where you were working with material to
Yes.
turn that into gold.
So, as part of the meditation, where you're in the laboratory, you're doing internal processes at the same time. We do a lot of distillation, and that idea of distillation is you have something in on one side in your distilling pot, and you're refining it. And this goes back to the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. We have a shot of Hermes up there we'll bring up in a bit. But, you know, the idea that the matter, as it is above, so it is below, and as below, so from above. So that matter goes from below, and the one flask goes up into the air. The wind carries it in its belly and gets carried over into the receiver.
Oh, there's Hermes.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of the transmutation of matter was for what reason?
Well, the transmutations were for making powerful medicines. In the lesser work, we start to work in the plant kingdom. In alchemy, there's the three kingdoms. You have the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom. And when we eat food, for instance, we get the nutrients. We can't just go out and pick up a shovel full of soil and eat it. So the plants are in between the mineral kingdom and the animal kingdom.
Wait, so there's three levels of alchemy. There's the animal alchemy, the plant alchemy, and the mineral alchemy.
And they're a complete set of works. So you start in the plant kingdom. That's the lesser
You don't start
works.
with the animals.
Right, no.
Because our body's doing that, right?
Yeah, exactly. We are internally an alchemical vessel, and our body is actually doing biological transmutations. When you talk about turning lead into gold, that's considered a transmutation in this concept of turning one element into another. And, you know, up until recent times, we kind of ruled that out and said, oh, that's totally impossible. But then with the CERN reactor and that, with particle colliders, we can bombard. It's a very expensive process, but we can today turn lead into gold.
We actually can.
Yes, yeah.
And they proved
it's been done. It's been proven.
So,
but that takes millions of dollars and a massive particle accelerator, right?
Right.
So.
Okay, so so the process is turning lead into gold, but that's not that's a metaphor.
Not how the alchemists did it, though.
No.
They had a simpler process they called the Philosopher's Stone.
Which is what?
And the Philosopher's Stone was capable of transmutating lesser metals into greater metals, more noble metals. And it also was capable of getting rid of all disease in the body.
It was?
So it became an elixir of immortality.
How did it do that?
Well, you could actually consume the Philosopher's Stone in small quantities.
What is the Philosopher's Stone?
Yeah, the Philosopher's Stone, so that lesser work in the plant kingdom. So basically how it works is you get initiated into learning laboratory processes. You work on medicinal plants.
So that's what you started.
Plants,
You worked with plants, which is what's called the minor work.
The minor work, yeah. We make a spagyric form of these. It's a tinctures.
And spagyric is a what?
It's a word that was coined by Paracelsus, who was a very famous alchemist and considered basically the forefather of modern medicine. And he was separating plants into their three philosophical principles or components. And one was the salt. That's the actual body of the plant. The other is the sulfur. The sulfur is the soul of the plant, and then.
Or would that be the essential oil too?
Yeah, exactly.
The oil
so
is
the oils are
soul
the salt
of the plant.
Yeah.
The solidity of the matter
is the body of the plant.
And then the spirit of the plant is the alcoholic. What's the difference between soul and spirit? I mean,
so the soul is unique to character signature. You know, when you smell an essential oil, you'll smell, oh, that's oranges or that's roses. You definitely know it's very distinct, right? And the mercury is more, it's more the subtle energy behind the life force, the chi, the prana.
Is that what they call the spirit?
The spirit, yeah.
Or the alcohol
and that's why we call alcohol spirits today. It comes from the alchemists, right?
So by mixing the transformed body with the soul and the spirit of that same plant, you can
Right.
make powerful.
Exactly. Because you're separating
Yeah.
them. That's what spagyric means, is to take it apart and you refine each of the principles and then you recombine them back together
How
as a
come
more
you can't
powerful
buy
whole.
that somewhere?
Well, it's
Because-
in Europe, it's still, you can still buy them in homeopathic forms.
Because that's the most powerful form then of the plant to take
Yeah,
a,
absolutely.
and you go. So the minor work on alchemy is going through each of those 3 distinct processes: distilling the soul, the
Right.
oil, and
Yes.
making the alcohol, and then,
in
dry.
the salt process, we
the s-
burn down the plant matter into ashes and then do an extract from those for all the minerals.
Oh.
So all those minerals get added back, and it gives the medicines a very electrical taste, like a sensation. When you put a drop on your tongue, you won't swallow it. It actually absorbs right through your body, and you feel this very etheric, energetic, vibrational
The
properties.
spagyric, or just the
In the
salt?
spagyrics.
The spagyric.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that is a great
It
art.
is.
So that's the
So-
minor work.
So
of
what basically you're getting your sea legs when you
Yeah.
work with with the plant kingdom. You learn all the processes, and then when you work in the mineral kingdom, it's exactly the same processes that you learn in the plant kingdom, except now you're working on metallic elements. So literally lead, silver, gold, mercury.
But it's interesting that they would put mineral kingdom above, calling that the major work. Where
Right. The
why-
reason being
yeah.
is because it's much more difficult. Of course, if you're working
Oh.
with lead, you have to really be a good laboratory artist at that point in order not to poison yourself.
What? So you're working with lead, and you're making those 3 components of lead.
Yes,
but,
you
but there's
separate-
no organic material to burn, and there's no
Well,
oil to get.
There is, yes.
There
There's
is.
a process, and
How would
we
you-
cross over in. There's what we call a menstruum, where it's a dissolving solution in the mineral kingdom that you derive from the plant kingdom,
Oh.
and then that will break down the metals. So basically, it's an acid, and you break down the metals into their fine components, and then you're actually producing. When you do a calcination, you produce a fine salt of the metals. And
How do you do? So let's say you're starting with lead. It's basic
Right.
lead. What would you do?
Yeah, well, there's different paths. The alchemists called it the dry path and the wet path. Those are the 2 main paths, and the acetate path is sort of a in-between path. But in the dry path, you use a lot of heat and a lot of fire, and you violently dismantle the elements into their components.
You can do that?
Yeah.
I mean,
and
that's
in
what
a
the
wet-
old alchemists.
That's the old alchemists, and you'll see them with their athanors and their furnaces, and their, they would have what they called a puffer, and the puffer had to puff on the big bellows and maintain that heat. And to do these processes, you had to keep a very accurate temperature
Oh.
and for long periods of time. So it was quite a laborious event.
But that's just the where would the spiritual element to that come in?
So the spiritual element is part of your meditation processes that you're doing at the same time.
Would they? I mean, that's why I
And-
read the alchemists would have to be in a different state in order for the metals to
Exactly.
change.
Yes, and some of these metals have a very powerful effect on the mind and on your emotional levels as well.
They're toxic as well.
And some of them are very toxic. So you had to become a real adept before you could start into the mineral kingdom. And part of taking the plant medicines that you're making from the plant kingdom prepared your body on 7 different levels in order to go into the mineral works. Otherwise, there's a lot of stories in history where people just jumped into the
Major
mineral
work.
work and then went insane, right?
Yeah.
So
I didn't realize you had to do the minor work.
yeah, it's
before you did the
prerequisite.
great work,
Yeah,
the lesser work
yeah.
before the
It's
great work.
physically, mentally, and spiritually preparing your body to go into the mineral work.
So then, the essence was to make gold.
Yes, yeah.
And did
So
they
gold was
make-
considered. Yes, there's many stories like Nicholas Flamel, you
Yeah.
know, from Harry Potter fame.
Well, way before Harry Potter, I knew
well,
Nicholas Flamel.
Yeah, exactly. So
didn't even know he
got
was in-
popularized.
I didn't know
oh
he
yeah,
was in
oh
Harry.
yeah, he's
Is
a
he-
major character
is
in
he?
there. Yeah, so
I didn't know that. I
we
guess
have a
I-
lot of students come to the class who are in younger generation, and that's how they got into it. Was Harry Potter was big inspiration for them.
Oh well, she just took stuff and made it commercial.
Absolutely,
but, I mean,
yeah.
Which is okay. At least people are finding
But
out
it
about
does.
it.
It created a sort of resurrection in alchemy, and there's a lot of new interest, and people are looking into practical alchemy a lot more.
So, but the idea overall,
So gold is like a noble metal. It's uncorruptible.
It
It
can't
doesn't
be tarnished.
rust. Right?
Yeah.
Can't be tarnished like silver will tarnish, and all the other elements in Indian alchemy. Interestingly enough, alchemy evolved in China and in India and in the West in the
and in
Hermetic
Arabia
tradition.
too.
Yeah, in Arabia, kind of moved out of Arabia into Middle Ages Europe,
from
basically.
the
But
Crusaders.
originally from Egypt,
Uh-huh.
and then went into. But all around the world, alchemy sort of has these same concepts and principles that evolved at the same time. And even though supposedly there was no communication between the Far East and Middle
Well,
East
there
and
probably
India at that
was.
time, but I definitely think there was. There was a lot of crossover.
Well, let's go through those images again. If we start with that
Sure.
first one, because I'm really learning a lot here.
Yeah.
you
So
know?
after that first image, we
the
have
guy swimming in the.
yeah,
Can
that's
we look
a
at that
dissolution phase.
Again? Okay, but
Yeah.
this dissolution is a later phase. What's the first phase?
The first phase is a calcination.
Which
and
means what?
That means the burning. That's the fire phase. So this
Okay.
is the water phase. So
Okay.
this would be after you've, for instance, in the salt portion, you burn your plant matter down into ashes, and then you do a dissolution phase where you're taking all the water-soluble minerals for your salts.
Okay, so let's keep going with
Yeah.
those slides.
Then
So-
there's the 7 planets.
okay, so we have gold, silver, iron, and they also correspond to the days of the week.
days of the week. This is where we literally get our names for the days of week.
So-
Sunday relates to gold and the sun. Monday, moon day, right? Tuesday
silver.
to Mars. Wednesday is sort of like Mercury is like the fastest moving planet. He's the go-between, the one who flew through the like Prometheus.
Why did they have to lay this out? Like, why was the metals and 7 and the days of the week so important to the ancients or the?
Well, part of the processing, like you look at lead is the farthest in Saturday. Lead is the slowest, dense. They say the people that sit on couch potatoes are very lethargic. We get the word.
And Saturn's the most furthest
Saturday is
out
the farthest planet away, and
Uh-huh.
it takes a long time to cycle around. So it relates in medicine-wise to the bones and the denser matter in the body.
And copper's like the nervous system, isn't it?
Well, Mercury's more the nervous system.
Mercury's
Yeah,
more the
copper's more the skin and the elimination organs.
Oh,
and
because every place is copper coated now. I mean,
Right.
copper wiring.
well,
everywhere.
we realize now the ancient people made copper pots, and they would keep their milk in there, and things now. So they're starting to replace like doorknobs instead of stainless steel in hospitals. They're replacing them with copper.
So how does this relate, though, to the alchemists in that sense? This chart of there's the 7 metals.
Yeah, the 7 processes of calcination go through there, and the idea is you start with lead and you work your way up to gold. So as you're going through these metals, the more refined they are, the more noble they are, the closer it gets to gold.
Okay, so
And
what
that's
else?
your ultimate goal. They also relate to the chakras.
Oh,
So lead
right.
being the root chakra, gold being the crown chakra.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else do we have there?
Yeah, and then this next slide is sort of the idea of geometry. This is circling the square. You might have heard that term.
But isn't also the combining of the male and female? Of
Yeah, all of alchemy is a balancing, because we live in this duality universe where everything goes through cycles and periods of night and day, left and right, up and down. So it was a fine art of balancing, and geometry really had a lot to do with the understanding the fundamental principles. Of these
It does,
concepts.
of alchemy.
Yeah, so coming up here in our next slide,
Yeah.
I think we have Plato.
Oh, no, next one.
So there's the 4 elements.
Right, yeah. And now we
so-
have the classical image
Yes, yeah.
of sacred geometry.
Yeah, so
What-
this is a Fibonacci spiral, or the golden mean spiral, and everything in nature. If you look at everything from plants to the sea line and the lake shores and things like this, all follows these fractal patterns that are recursive and they continuously embed in each other.
What I love about this is the blueprint of life.
It is absolutely the blueprint,
And
all the way from down to the smallest nano subatomic particles to galaxies. And
so the Darwinian philosophy that life is arbitrary and that it's
just
an
random fluke of chance. No,
they're not including the basic geometry
right.
of life.
There's
here.
a pattern, yeah.
There's a pattern that replicates,
it's like
that is
God's fingerprint, right?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a natural order.
Yes, there is.
How could we have forgotten that?
And this progression. Well, I don't know, because it's in front of our face and we see it every time we look at a flower,
But
every time we walk
how do you
in the
explain
park.
this progression? You start in the center, or when
Yeah,
do
you can start in the center and it's expanding outwards.
So
and
you have a box, you have a square.
Yes,
And
and
then
so you multiplying it. The phi ratio is 1.618.
What does that mean?
So if we go back to the camera, we can show you simply right on your hand here.
Oh, okay.
The digits of your hand, for instance. So everything on your body is phi ratio. So this little segment to this segment is that 1.618 ratio to the next segment, next digit in your finger, then your hand, then to your elbow.
What do you mean 1.6 ratio? If I take
so
the measurement
if you multiply
of this,
that, yeah, that's 0.618 of this.
Wait. Okay, so if I measure the small piece and I measure the large piece,
and
divided it,
that cut, they call it the golden cut of 6.18 is exactly where the knuckle is.
So if I take the small measurement and divide it into the large measurement, I get approximately 1.68.
Yes.
And that 1.68 division goes from
this digit to
that
this
digit, from this to this.
So you can see how it's kind of growing in size.
And as in the division, it starts to get more refined.
More
too.
refined, exactly. That's the Fibonacci sequence that bounce back. 1 plus 1 is 2, and 2 plus 1 is 3, and then you keep adding the numbers together in their sequence, and they skip back and forth on that golden mean. That's the Fibonacci sequence.
The Fibonacci sequence. So you get the same division when you divide. So the Fibonacci is 1 plus 1 equals 2, and
1 plus 2 equals 3, then 2 plus 3,
5. 5 plus 3 is 8.
Yeah.
So if I divide 8 into 5, I start to get that same 1.6.
Yeah, there's other relationships that you can look at like that
so
too.
Numbers
proportion.
and biology link up together.
To this proportion,
How
absolutely.
come no one ever talks about that?
No, but the artists knew it. Leonardo da Vinci and all these famous art pieces you see. When you get out, you can make it's quite a simple little device, but it's a golden mean compass, and you start measuring, and that's essentially how they were doing that measuring in the.
Because it's harmonious. That's the key.
Harmonious.
That's why artists hook up, because there's something relaxing in looking at these.
That's right.
The geometry
ratio,
and those ratios create a harmony.
If you give set 5 different rectangles in front of people, and one rectangle is the golden mean rectangle, and you say to anybody random off the street, which is your favorite rectangle? Which one appeals to you the most? They'll all point to that.
Because it has a harmony.
Because it has that harmony that they've seen in nature over and over again.
Well, it's interesting. Because we're made of that harmony, we resonate with that harmony.
Absolutely, yeah.
It shows you there's something
and that's
to
the beauty in nature.
Yeah,
so a big part of alchemy is recognizing that beauty in nature.
Oh. So let's go back to the slides, because I think we're making some interesting progress there.
Yeah.
So, so you have the golden mean ratio, which is the basic, and that's sort of there.
Right, yeah.
And then after that.
So a lot of this goes back to Plato and Timaeus.
Oh, wait, go back to Plato.
Yeah, so there's Plato, and as it was actually Leonardo da Vinci who posed for this.
For that Raphael drawing of the School of Athens,
painting,
where he took
famous painting with all the greats were
all
in
the
there.
great Greek philosophers. So how do we go from the golden mean spiral to the phi ratio to the
5 Platonic solids?
To the solids.
Yeah.
How do we go from there?
So all the Platonic solids can nest within each other, and they're all in ratios of this golden mean ratios as they nest into each other.
How do you get the golden mean ratio from the solids?
Well, you'd have to see them all embedded in each other. You've maybe seen where the tetrahedron fits into the cube when it turns sideways. The cube fits into the octahedron. and so forth. But they represented the 5 elements as well. We talked about the earth, air, water, and fire.
What was the 5th element?
So the 5th element that we haven't talked about yet is the spirit. That's what the Greeks kept hidden in the school of Pythagoras, and that it was like
that's what they call the quintessence, or the quintessential aspect is the 5th essence.
Yeah, and that's represented by the dodecahedron in this case. So back then there was common knowledge about the 4 Platonic solids, but the dodecahedron was really kept secret because that contains the phi ratio embedded in it deeply.
And so that's the alchemical secret in a way.
Absolutely.
Is that a philosopher's stone?
Yeah, exactly. You could see the philosopher's stone correlated to the dodecahedron.
What is the philosopher's stone?
So it's a combination of all the elements in perfect harmonic proportions. So the tetrahedron relates to fire.
Yeah.
The octahedron relates to air. The cube relates to earth. The icosahedron relates to water. Now, in that mysterious 5th element, that's what made the philosopher's stone so powerful. It was the ideal combination of matter that was capable of transmutating these lesser metals into.
But how do you make the philosopher's stone?
Well, that's a long process that many people have asked that question throughout the ages and spent their lifetime
because
on it.
It's a rejuvenate, it's a longevity, it's a drug of immortality.
Exactly, and if you are capable of creating it, then you can fund your projects. It's also elixir of immortality. So the concept was you had to make it in order to live long enough. You had to at least get to a certain stage where you made the elixir of immortality, because it took you a long time, more than a lifetime's worth of work.
Oh, I see.
To confect the stone.
But they say Ormus now is that.
But there's sort of a modern concept. I wouldn't say now, when David Hudson came out with the whole Ormus revolution that's happening, and Ormus is amazing stuff, and we really have to re-look at how we look at the periodic table of elements, for instance. I think we have to make a 3rd dimension, and that's kind of what Walter Russell
of elements
did. Yes.
Oh.
All right. And so we can understand this idea of what Hudson called the high spin state. Now, he called it the philosopher's stone. It may be hinting towards the philosopher's stone, but Ormus elements still are not exactly.
So part of the process of alchemy was to make the philosopher's stone to gain greater insights into the process of alchemy.
That's right. And as you took these powerful medicines, it opened up your consciousness, unlocked, so you were capable of going further along the path.
If it didn't kill you, if your body was at a vibration where it could absorb that.
Right.
So it was a dangerous science in a way.
Yeah, it was, but you had to be a pure heart, right? And then you gained access to the information.
Well, let's just go back to the slide so we can finish them up and then at least tell us where we're going now.
Yeah, so I'm going to, we look a lot at the ancient ways and ancient techniques, and then look at modern scientific discoveries like the Ormus concept. Here's a chart showing different wavelengths of resonance, and if you see that little sliver where that arrow points to a visible light, right in the middle, right? Actually, about 6 point, the phi ratio into this chart. That's our visible spectrum. That's what we perceive. That little
so much more
teeny
going
sliver
on around us.
But so that's just giving us that idea. In the next slide, it shows this idea of resonance. This is our frequency. Everything around us is frequency. And Walter Russell said everything is sort of from the one, through the one, to the one, which is an old alchemical axiom. But it was Tesla who really understood resonance in our modern times and how to make these resonance systems.
Okay, so the next slide is, do we get to Tesla somewhere? Oh, no, that's just
so this shows the fractality in nature and the concept of the planets. But that's okay. Next slide. So Isaac Newton again was
an alchemist.
He was an alchemist, but in modern physics, he's considered the grandfather of physics.
Of modern physics. They leave out the fact
But Princeton University, interestingly enough, has dug up a lot of his books. See, after he passed away, his family was a little bit embarrassed about the whole alchemical thing, so they buried his material away. But it's all coming back out now.
Yeah, he also was a seer. He predicted the reformation of the state of Israel. He had some strange ideas.
And a lot of Bible prophecy, and he understood the Bible
and some of those predictions did happen.
They did, for sure.
He lived in the 1600s. Okay, next slide then is this.
So this is the idea of the primal materia, we call it in alchemy, and how it comes from above, from this universal cosmic, universal one, that splits into this duality and then into the four elements, and then those are the philosophic principles we talked about.
What are the philosophic?
The sulfur, salt, and mercury.
So
And that's what makes up all matter. It's like a blueprint.
So the bottom thing there,
Is the quintessence. So when you've refined those three principles, then you create the quintessence, and that becomes your elixir or the philosopher's stone.
Okay, great. That's a great chart. Okay, next slide then is
So
Hermes, who was the father of alchemy.
coming from Egypt. Thoth was, Hermes evolved from Thoth in Egypt and Mercury in Roman times.
What is this, though?
So this is like an interesting, in the temple in Dendera, they have this, a lot of people say this was an old light bulb and that the ancient people had a lot of really advanced technology.
Yeah, I think they did have electricity.
Yeah, because there's no charred markings. When you go into the pyramids, if they were in there with torches and, the way you'd picture them lighting the place, there's no carbon markings on the ceiling.
But there's no remnants of these electrical...
There's a few, actually, in those, from the king's chamber, you go up those two little side chambers and those little windows. If you go halfway up through the pyramid in there, there's copper electrodes that are embedded in the stone. And there's a few, Christopher Dunn and a few people have done this concept of the Giza power plant. The pyramids were actually an electrical generator, which is just fascinating.
Okay, the next slide then is...
so moving on to more, going to the father of medicine, Paracelsus
and the
is
father
the
of
one.
Alchemy in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Medicine and alchemy.
Yeah, so he really,
He is the father of modern medicine, though, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely, because he was the first to really refine. He created the salt element. We kind of, up to that point, were interested in the mercury and the sulfur, so he unified the
mercury is the what?
The spirit.
And the sulfur
and the sulfur. So you hear about people in ancient religious texts talk about the spirit and the soul all the time, but the body, Paracelsus realized, we're missing this third component, the body.
Okay, so then what else do we have here?
Yeah. And so moving to more modern times, so this is Oliver Heaviside, and actually he is very heavy. He rewrote Maxwell's equations, and originally Tesla and these great scientific thinkers at the turn of the century were taught by Maxwell's equations. If you go to the next slide, you see a little bit about Maxwell. James Clerk Maxwell.
He's the father of modern electricity.
He put everything together like a unified field for electricity. So heat, light, mechanical, and magnetism. He created formulas that helped us today and really built the world that we live in today.
Incredible what one guy did.
Absolutely.
Without Maxwell, we'd be sitting in a cave.
That's right. And what we have to do is relook at Maxwell's work, because originally his equations accounted for things like ether theory, stuff that got nixed and got cut out of the...
It got nixed because it was too mystical, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And it was Oliver Heaviside who rewrote...
Heaviside, the guy we just saw.
Yeah, who rewrote these equations that we're taught today in modern university.
But he left out a whole section.
But he cut out that whole section of...
Einstein was aware of some of the Maxwell stuff. But
absolutely. But he was working on his own theory of relativity, and,
So the next slide then is...
so that was just sort of a modern...
That's Maxwell.
Yeah, version of Maxwell
what
and
he's
some
created,
of his creations.
And so Edison, you worked with Maxwell's ideas then, right? Tesla too.
Yeah, Tesla. See, Tesla was highly educated. Edison wasn't. Edison was more a self-taught businessman.
Let's go to the next slide. I think there's Tesla and Edison together. No, that's...
So Walter Russell. Okay, so just before we get into Tesla, Walter Russell was a visionary artist who just had these mystical visions and was downloaded. He got hit by lightning, and they thought he had gone insane because he laid in his bed for 20 days just rambling all this esoteric knowledge.
Wow.
And on the next slide here, at that time the periodic table was very simple, the square periodic table that we know today, and only a few of the elements were on there. But Walter Russell came up with this idea of harmonics and octaves and placing all the elements that we know today into this table, and he predicted elements that were not even discovered at that time.
Did he rewrite the periodic table?
Yeah, he did. So that's his version of the periodic table, which was light years ahead, because when he wrote the Universal One, and he sent it out to all the top universities around the world, And all the top scientists at the time, so I mean Niels Bohr and Thomas Edison Einstein and all these guys would have got a copy of this. The only person that replied back to him after receiving a copy of his book was Nikola Tesla.
And what did Tesla think of this?
Tesla said to Walter Russell, I think you should bury this book for 1,000 years because humanity is not ready for this information yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
But people don't really talk about Walter Russell. They
No.
talk about Tesla, but
Yeah,
Russell was
exactly.
quite a genius.
He
Okay,
was.
what else do we have then? So after Russell, that's
So around that time, this is another character who was really a forward thinker. This is Victor Schauberger, and he was an Austrian forest ranger
And
who
he looked
studied nature
and
again,
water, the patterns in water.
patterns in water. And this was actually a power system that he envisioned everybody would have in their home that gave them basically what you call free energy today.
And what, can we do that? Can we make that now?
Well, a lot of his old designs and everything disappeared after he died, and some of them have been slowly appearing. So there are people today working on his works.
Wow, between Tesla and Schauberger, we would have free energy.
Exactly.
By now.
If we had to listen to these men instead of pushing them aside in history, in the name of big business and corporations and selling people electricity, we would have free electricity and healthy water and be living on a
what else do we
pristine
have?
environment.
Oh, here's Edison.
So here's Edison's, and these quotes, kind of give them. Tesla says, "I don't care that they stole my idea. I care that they don't have any of their own."
Right.
Right.
Hell, there are no rules.
Whereas Thomas Edison's, "Hell, there are no rules. We're trying to accomplish something." He was a real businessman.
So they did work together, as legend has it, story, and then actually it was Tesla who developed the idea for alternative current, right?
Yes. And Edison was DC, direct current, which we now know would have been impossible to do because you can't transmit DC for long distances.
So the only reason we have an electrical grid is because of Tesla.
Is because of Tesla, exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
and
it all started right here in New York, right?
It did. But of course, there's so many more ideas about Tesla that we...
Yeah, that's a whole week-long...
We should just do a Tesla...
Tesla series, yeah.
All right, so what's the next thing then we have here is...
so let's ramp it right up. So what the alchemists were talking about in the ancient times with this idea of transmutation. So you talked about earlier when we were talking about the particle collider and turning lead into gold. Well, can that be done today? Absolutely. It's really being done in a lot of modern power systems, and this is the concept of cold fusion that really got that smear campaign with Pons and Fleischmann and disappeared from view for the last 25 years. Well, now there are characters like Andrea Rossi. This is a cold fusion reactor that puts out 1 megawatt of power.
Wait, what is cold fusion? Explain that.
So cold fusion is the idea that these elements are fusing together. So nuclear fission is where, this is how our modern nuclear reactors work. They split atoms apart and create energy from that. But energy is also created when atoms are combined together. That's the fusion process. But in modern scientific belief, they thought there was so much energy there, it would make a very hot system. And the idea of cold fusion is it happens at nominal temperatures.
So Rossi came up with a new way to generate energy.
Yeah, exactly. So Rossi's got this system on board and is working right now to put in the first commercialized version of a cold fusion reactor that will heat an entire shopping mall or a small village or something on it.
And that's where we are now in the alchemical history,
Yes,
right?
because what's happening inside of Rossi's reactors is a transmutation of the elements. So it's a modern day alchemy where he's basically transmuting one element into another.
And he is doing that.
Yes.
So we should have free energy.
Yeah, it's very close.
It is?
Yeah, it's just around the corner.
I'm sure Roger Green will be happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Roger was my sponsor here. Breakthrough Technologies is. We did this conference here this week, and so we have to thank Roger for that.
Let's thank Roger for doing all that. But I mean, the leading edge is that we're about to use alchemical elements to create this energy
of the future.
Wow. Okay, we can go back to us and so to wrap it all up, because that was
quite a timeline condensation.
We have the modern cold fusion, we have the alchemical element, we have the sacred geometry, you have the personal transformation.
Right.
How do you put it all together?
So all of those go together into leading us into this new generation. A lot of people say that There's a lot of problems on Earth right now. We have oil spills. We have Fukushima reactors
Right.
going off and radiation. But the sort of the what to look forward to is that these new energies and these new concepts that are really old concepts are going to help us recreate and rebuild the planet Earth. We'll be able to clean up all the oil spills, all the damage that we've done with these new energies once we've come to utilize energy that's we're not taxing the Earth. These are not
Wow.
renewable. They're renewable energies.
That is a great summation.
Yeah.
That was worth the whole journey.
Right.
Just
yeah.
to know that we can develop a technology that can save the planet.
Yeah.
And
so it's a positive message,
Yeah.
despite all the doom and gloom that everybody's hearing every day.
Wow.
I like to put the positive spin on things and give people hope, because really this is just on the forefront and you're not seeing it in the modern media, but it's all happening behind the scenes.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having
Aurelius
me.
Electron.
Yeah.
No, what's your
Yeah, Aurelius Electrum. Yeah.
Aurelius Electron.
Yeah.
Working with alchemy to change the world and create new
Yeah.
possibilities.
Yeah.
Your website?
It's quantum-solutions.ca, and you can go online, and there's not much there right now, but we'll be adding some more material in the future.
Great, and we'll go back into more discussions about that when you come back.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll
So-
have a lot more information up there.
Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
watching New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld with Aurelius Electrum and the Alchemy Revolution. I'm Alan Steinfeld for New Realities. Thanks for watching. I'm at newrealities.com. Email me at the letter A, at newrealities.com. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was good. It was a nice encapsulation
Yeah.
and overview.